Good morning to everybody. This is our weekly version of the Ascended World.
Or WTF?
Or the WTF world, yeah. As we start today, after we've had an offline discussion for almost an hour, so it's like, maybe we should start recording.
Yeah.
Because there is that much going on in so many facets of my reality, Sarah's reality. So this is Angela Coulter and Sarah Sieg, Avignone. I don't even know where to start today because we've sort of gone around this whole gamut. One of the things, what was I thinking about this morning? I thought it would be, you know what? If there was something I was thinking might be a good thing to start talking about, and now it's gone. So obviously that wasn't it.
Yeah. Well, we talked about something last night, and that's gone too. The burning question that I have is, and I'm sure like everything else we've talked about it before. It's like you're here, and you know this is ultimately where you're going. It's like, how do you bridge the gap? How do you manage the transition? When do you stop buying into this and start buying into this? And what does that look like? And how do you do that?
Yeah. That's a question a lot of people have.
Well, and okay, so I believe I can heal myself. So do I stop going to the doctor? Do I stop taking vitamins? There's got to be a remembering that happens.
Well, and I always say the more we become, I'm looking at my notes from our call last night, because there was something that we said, oh, this would be something we could talk about tomorrow, and I can't even remember what that was. Oh, I remember what it was. Yeah, that'll come up. I'm going to write this down. Come back to that. So to come back to that question, right? It goes back to the guidance thing, right? And why again, and it's so funny, is like we can talk about this till we turn blue in the face, that the most important part is becoming dependent on our own guidance, right? Finding a way to become dependent on our own guidance, loving ourselves unconditionally, to trust that we have the guidance that fits into the bigger picture, even if it doesn't look like it in the moment. And that's the trust part, right?
Right.
So it sounds really easy, but that's the hardest part for us because we always doubt, right? Like what we were talking about before we got online. And
and you get into, okay, if my guidance says this and it seems so contrary to current thinking, then I start judging myself.
Right. Am I a bad person?
Am I a bad person?
Right.
What will people think if I don't? Which is so different than what?
Right. Well, and I'll give a personal experience myself, right? Because that happened in the past, which was when I had my cat that had the tumor on his butt. I remember that. And it showed up really quickly, or quickly enough that, or I didn't see it till it was larger, because you don't sit and look at your cat's butt all the time, right? So, but I noticed he had been cleaning it. Anyway, so I kept on asking whether I should take him, and I kept on getting, it doesn't matter, it's not going to make a difference. And so I didn't take him for a little bit, right? And then, of course, because I see this thing on his butt, and I'm just like, and I don't know, like, I'm not a vet.
You say to yourself, I can't not do anything.
Right, because then you judge yourself for being a bad person and uncaring and everything else. So I was like, okay. And I would ask every day, is it highest and best for me to call the vet today? Is it highest and best? And I would get, no, it's not going to make a difference. And I would talk to the cat, and he would say, nope, I'm good. And I understood where it came from energetically and why he had manifested that, and he, according to him, was taking care of it. And my guidance was it wasn't going to make a difference. The guidance literally was it wouldn't make a difference whether I took him to the vet or not.
Right.
So finally, my ego got the worst, got the best of me. And I finally took him into the vet, spent hundreds of dollars, on tests and biopsies and everything else for it to come back. Well, this is what they said. Oh, so it's benign. It's coming up at the cellular level is benign. However, it's going to continue to grow, and we can't remove it, because if we did, it would make him completely incontinent, because it's right around the nerves, where he goes to the bathroom. So yeah, that's your choice. You could just leave it, do your best to treat him. And he was 16 years old at the time. It was like, so you could do your best to treat that, or, minimize its growth and whatever, which is what I was already doing with herbs and other stuff. Or you can, try to get it removed, not guarantee it's not going to move back, come back, grow back. And then he's be completely incontinent. And I was like, yeah, no.
Yeah. I mean, I know.
And so really, ultimately, when I went back and I looked at that, it really did make a difference that I had spent all that money at the vet, because I came back with the same answer that I'd gotten before, which is,
it really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And yeah, he ultimately died when it got too big and it blocked everything or whatever. But that was 8 months later. It grew pretty fast, and it was time for him to go, and he was ready to go. And he was my shaman cat, I used to call him, because he was convinced too that he was going to figure out how to ascend right out of his body and not have to die. And I was like, all right, you figure that out, pal. Let me know, because that's what we're working on.
Right.
But anyway, this is where, well, see my cough, have I coughed this entire hour while we were talking? I did not. We did not. This cough comes back. So that's the biggest challenge we have, is when number one, we can hear guidance, right? That's the first step. Number two is listening to guidance over. And number three is listening to it over everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And trusting it. And being so strong in that clarity and that tie to the guidance that it's not the ego, being able to trust it's not the ego, all that kind of stuff. Because if we make a decision from judgment, that's from ego, right? If I make a decision of, I was going to think I'm a bad person because I didn't call the vet for my cat, I mean, which is essentially what I ended up doing, right?
Right.
Or like a loser, or you're not a good. What was that? Sorry. Yeah, no, because I was not a good caretaker by not taking to the vet with this thing on his butt, even though my guidance was, it's not going to make a difference. And even the cat told me it's not going to make a difference. Well, then we start to doubt, is that actually the real guidance, or am I making that up? Right.
Well, and then you find yourself hearing, I really should take him to the vet, or I really should do something about this, or I need to find out, or I have to do this. I just, yeah.
So I've changed and the shoulds are all ego, right? Because that's it. Shoulds are based on better or worse. So I've changed a lot of my questions. So first of all, one of the things to look at is, changing a lot of our questions. Because, one of the questions, so if we're in that kind of scenario, right? I've changed the question to, will it improve the animal's quality of life now if I take them to the vet?
Yeah.
More so than I can do here. That's a very different question, right? Than, should I take them to the vet?
Right.
And then, of course, we step up to that, beyond that, and then people who have small kids and stuff like that, well, then you have the same kind of questions. Well, then it becomes, well, then am I being a deficient parent because I'm not doing this, right?
Right.
Because we have so many of these judgments built in culturally, and look at all the propaganda. Oh, you better get to the doctor right away, instead of, wait, there are 50 things you can do that's going to prevent you from needing to go to the doctor.
Well, I mean, and it's like, oh, you have a little bit of mucus? Well, take something.
Right.
It's not like, well, have you tried, these different things that are maybe altering your environment a little bit, or, showering or breathing steam, or, and it's like, oh, well, it has to be chemically controlled.
Right. Versus
Yeah.
letting your body process through what's processing through.
Right.
And that you can shift it so that it's not such a
burden.
Yeah.
Or perceived burden.
Yeah. Well, what I have noticed, honestly, that I was thinking about over this past week that I was actually sort of happy about was that I'm seeing more, I don't know about by you, but here in North Carolina, I'm actually seeing more like herbal based remedies in the regular drugstore than I ever have before.
Yeah. Yep.
Like in the front, like I walked into CVS the other day, and right on the front line where they have like all the, like, like the cold seasonal stuff, right? They had a whole thing of elderberry, like syrup and everything else. And I was like, nice. Like that's impressive, because usually you have to just go to Whole Foods to get that stuff. So, people they're coming around, and like, there's the big mass, this mass consciousness on the, because you have the MLMs for essential oils, right? So there's been this huge uprising in consciousness around essential oils.
Right.
So, which is great, because it's just another thing we have that supports us in our vibration, because those have vibrations too. But this is a really important topic, because that's the question I get from everyone, including us. Like, we do every once in a while too. It's like, like you said to me, hey, could you give me a non-judgmental, like,
right.
Like a non-judgmental opinion, or an objective opinion on, or just guidance on what you feel like this is. And it's like, well, we just do that every once in a while, because then what is that? That's doubt, that our ego is telling us one thing, versus another, right? Especially if we get angry about something, and then we're making not judgments, but calls, judgment calls on from anger. So,
well, and especially if it's something that is, hits close to a soft spot, something that you lose objectivity over.
Right.
It's a very emotional subject.
Right. And it's funny, because I guess for me, I was pushed to make decisions for myself first with my guidance back when I was really getting into practice of all that. God, I went through, and I gave myself some harsh experiences to get through, to depend on my own guidance, like, God, that I told you about the really, really intense experience I had with the poison ivy that time, right?
Yeah.
And then the guidance was, nope, you can do this without anything. You can change this like on a dime. And it was like, this is so miserable. What an exercise in transcending discomfort, and physical discomfort, or what I perceived to be or created for myself. And there was that, and then there was the rashes. Yeah, rashes were a big thing for me in the beginning of all this. Not anymore. But I was pushed to make decisions. And then there was the hemorrhoid thing. That was a really funny story I used to tell. Or I told you about that, right?
I don't think so.
Really? I never told you about that? So I had never had any issues ever with hemorrhoids. I think I had an hemorrhoid like when I gave birth, right, for the first time. But it never bothered me or anything like that. So there's this one period that I had gotten one. And it was really annoying. And I had this cream that was sitting on my counter in my bathroom, and it wasn't used for hemorrhoids, right? It was actually a Sieg detox thing, right? I think you've had that. You know what I'm talking about, right? Sea herb detox gelée or whatever, which is great for any kind of skin thing, right? But it's sitting there, and my guidance was use that, and I was like, that's not for hemorrhoids, like, because doesn't have hemorrhoids, right? So now I'm trying, the over-the-counter stuff, and then even looking online and doing all this Google searching, and then trying this and this. And this is like, it's getting progressively worse and progressively more uncomfortable. And I'm like, this is getting me crazy. And I kept on getting the guidance to try that cream. And I was like, no, like I kept on looking at it like, no. I overrode the guidance like 4 or 5 times until I finally was like woken up in the middle of the night. It was that uncomfortable. And I was just like, this really sucks. And I was really pissed. And I was standing in the bathroom and I got this like, are you going to try it ever? And I was like, well, at this point, what's there to lose? Right. And I used it and I went to sleep and I woke up and it was pretty much gone the next morning. So I want you to know every other thing that I've ever gotten guidance to use that cream for, I've used it on the first guidance ever. But I created those situations for myself on huge lessons on listening to guidance because I heard it again. And what did I keep on saying? No, it's what, other people are doing, what other people told me to do, what Google told me to do, what, all that kind of stuff.
What the internet told me to do.
Right. Because if it's on the internet, it's obviously correct. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So it was this whole litany of like, okay, are you ever going to listen? And I was already I was already pretty good on listening to my own guidance, but there's always a thing. There's always a switch for us, right? Where will we not listen? Because our fear will get the best of us. Our unworthiness will get the best of us because we feel like the other people, like doctors or other people, have the answers more than us. And I always say to everyone, like, even with all the natural stuff or anything, no two of us are physically the same. Right. So what has worked wonderfully for one person might not work for you, or vice versa. And right. And that's another reason to really get dependent on your own guidance and ask, will this alleviate this? Will this take care of this for me? Versus just saying, oh, well, so-and-so tried this, so I'm going to try it. And that doesn't work. And then you're like, well, why didn't it work for me? Well, did you ask?
Yeah.
So, that is a really big thing. And I guess it came back around because it's like we're up leveling again, right?
Right. Well, the things that we're receiving guidance on are deemed more important or
yeah, they're at a different level of urgency. Yeah.
Right.
So it goes back to getting into the practice, really being conscious of okay, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because it's expected of me? It's what other people expect. It's what makes me considered a good person or a good parent or a good pet owner or a good friend or spouse or whatever. Versus, is it really what I was guided to do? Because what I'm seeing really clearly right now as things start starting to make this big why and they're diverging, right? So what it might seem like to do, because who would have ever thought of telling me to use that like obscure cream that is like not even officially used for skin stuff, but to just like soothe the skin or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't even used for that originally. Like, who would have even thought of saying that to me anyway? Right? The guidance was, you already have what you need right here. How much money would I have saved had I not gone out and bought all the freaking, this and that and everything else and homeopathy and herbs and over-the-counter stuff. And it's like, and one thing that I had on my counter worked within hours, right? Right. So, and I mean, hemorrhoids is a pretty low priority kind of thing, except when it starts to be a literal pain in the ass, right? But, and I like using, actually, it's a funny, I swear I went back to bed and I just could hear this laughing out there. Like, yeah, it's like, okay, great. Yeah, I'm so happy that I'm amusing everyone in the ethers. It's fabulous. But, which is me anyway, right? I'm amusing myself. But it makes sense that this is an important thing for us to cover right now, because everybody thinks they have it until they don't, right? Until they, and we don't even listen to ourselves sometimes saying, well, I don't know, what do you think?
I know, yeah.
Right? Or so-and-so did this. And you know, it's not bad to say so-and-so did this and it worked, right? The next step is what is important for us to remember, which is, and I asked guidance if it would work similarly for me and got yes. That's the extra step in there. Because if you get no, keep on looking, you know. And sometimes I think we put that in front of us to sort of test our veracity, you know, test our ability to discern, right? The guidance. So what does that lead us to? I feel like I keep on seeing things that are more and more unbelievable to the eyes, right? And it goes back to guidance I think that we got several years back, which was stop believing what you see with your eyes.
Right.
It's almost like we're here at the threshold now. It's like, yeah, now it's not just like practice. Now it's literal, right?
Yeah, the real deal.
And remember, something to really remember is, have we talked about this on this before? We might have, who knows? But that whole, yeah, no, I think you and I talked about this on the phone. I don't know. I can't tell the difference anymore. That whole understanding of, it's important for us to remember, until our bodies fully shift into a new crystalline kind of ability, right, base, which is the carbon, that the way that our senses have been developed in the physical body are to accommodate the range of frequency that we are used to existing in, or focusing our incarnate existence in the body, right? Because that's your physical senses. The key to remember is that it's a very small, those 5 physical senses that we talk about in our incarnation here, the scent, the sight, the hearing, the touch, and the taste, are just a very tiny piece of our true consciousness. And those senses are just like, you know, messages here in the physical. So what we were talking about is somewhere was that, you know, like, for example, traditionally, our ears have only heard and been able to translate the vibrations at a certain frequency, you know, within a certain frequency range.
Right. Yeah.
Like animals like dogs and cats can hear different frequencies than we can hear. Right. But doesn't mean that because we don't hear them, they don't exist. It means that our ears have not been attuned to that. And I feel like our ears, I think that's part of the thrumming that a lot of us are hearing now.
Mm-hmm.
Attunement.
Well, they used to in there even ringtones that kids hear that adults can't hear.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That adults have lost that range.
Yeah, because I think we get more focused, you know, as we go. Often we do. It's not a rule. So I think that's what that thrumming is. A lot of us are getting occasionally like ringing, you know, that comes and goes. Right. But and then there's this, for lack of a better word, like we were talking about last night, this thrumming that's like a vibrational whoosh.
It almost feels more full body than just.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can perceive it in the ear because it's almost like this, it's in between the physical and the non-physical.
Yeah, right? That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and so some people get, I mean, it has gotten, I had that go on, yeah, we've had that go on off and on for years, and when it first had, like, it would get uncomfortable, it would feel so intense sometimes, and my understanding is that it has to do with our vibrational shifting and our bodies adjusting to the vibrational foundation, because it's continuing to rise, you know, it's like the basis for our physical existence. And so the thing that had come to me about that was, well, there are a lot of people who are having issues with their eyes that they don't understand, like, where that's coming from, or why suddenly their eyes feel like they're even more deficient, or, you know, getting worse, or some weird things happening with them. And I feel like that's the same thing, is because our eyes are only built to see certain frequencies, but we're shifting so that we have a new foundation of existence at this entirely new expanded set of frequencies. Not new, but newly perceived in the physical body. And so, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of challenge and bucking, I think, from the physical body as it's working to adjust, which of course goes back to the guidance thing, because it's freaking a lot of people out. Okay. And they end up
guidance.
Yeah. And then it's like, so they're like, okay, well, should I go to the doctor? You know, like, go to the doctor, get all these tests and all this kind of stuff. And then the doctor's like, there's nothing wrong with you. It looks fine. Or, you know, that's happening a lot. I hear a lot of people like, well, they couldn't find anything. So then they give you a pill to alleviate the symptom, instead of, well, energetically, you know, what I would say to myself, my higher self, is, so then energetically, what is there for me to do so that this balances and harmonizes, and, you know, and I allow this to shift the way it's moving to shift.
Right.
That's what I've been asking a lot lately. And that tends to, when the thrumming comes in, I ask that, or actually now I just ask to allow myself to just fully, you know, balance and harmonize and align with that vibration in the physical. It tends to alleviate it. Versus a lot of people saying, oh, I have tinnitus, I have that, you know, I have this, I have that, or whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's a symptom, but it's not. So really important is that trust. Trusting is what I'm getting, because it's the trusting that you listen, that you can, number one, so the people who are listening to this have the basis of an understanding on how to access their guidance.
Right.
The other, see, and it goes back to also like what we were talking about last night, and we talked about this sometime in the past couple of weeks. It also ties back into that crap, I just lost it. It floated away. Trusting guidance.
Well, I think as long as you stay, as long as your focus is in staying with the things that bring you joy and the bliss, and you're living in that alignment, the guidance should come easier to trust, and everything should flow more in that easy direction. So you don't feel that you're swimming against the current, so you don't feel that you're there. It's almost like it takes the downside away, unless you allow that ego to come in there and go, but what about other people? What about what other people think?
What if I'm wrong?
Right. That's a good one. Yeah, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong about all this?
Yeah. Yes, and the key, the importance right now is that there's so much to, oh, I know what I was going to say. Yeah, there's so much to decide on. Oh, there's your yawn. Yeah. There's so much to decide on. No, I'm yawning. In every moment now, right?
Right.
That there's no room to try these other things that don't work for you. There's just no room. There's no bandwidth for it. Just don't waste your...
you can't give the focus and attention to everything that's flowing through like you used to be able to when things were moving at a much slower pace. But it's like you have to come to some level of being where you're in that place of joy and flow, to where you don't have to look at every little thing. You just trust that it's at that level with you, or you let it go.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be analysis paralysis.
Well, and that's really what has held us back in the past, right? So it's really funny is that I see that. And, as we are all coming online more and more, right? There's the phase of analysis paralysis because then the mind has something new to analyze and explore. And it's natural where, where somebody wants to read 5 million books, they want to go to 5,000 classes, they want to, analyze everything that happens and why does it happen and how does it happen and everything else. It's a whole bunch of energy that we put to all that. And eventually you get to the place where it's like, I don't even have the energy to put the energy there anymore. Like, I don't even want to put the energy there anymore. So it's just like, okay. And I'll see it now, and you just become observant. So others is like, okay, you want to explore this? That's your choice. That's your journey. That's awesome and beautiful in itself, right? If this is what comes to you, then do it, and blah, 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 blah. Except I'm not feeling, like it's not for me, unless I'm guided that it is for me. But most of the time it's like, no, it's just another.
And it seems like the times that, you get pulled out of that flow of that trust and moving in that direction based on guidance is when the ego goes, well, wait a minute. I need to look at something, or I need to investigate this, or I have questions about that. And that's when things tend to not flow, get gunked up,
or we are still looking to somebody else to give us the answers.
Right.
And we never stop to say, is this my truth? Is this going to work for me? Right.
Right.
In the same way. I had a great observation of that over the weekend. There's, I won't name the person, but there's somebody prominent, very prominent in the spiritual world, who's written a bunch of books and everything else, who, this is the new thing, right? Because we had election day last week. So when she comes and says, writes to her community page, oh, well, I was thinking about it and I want to know what you guys think if I decide to run for president. Right.
Right.
And she's like, well, and of course it would be as a Democrat or whatever. And this is somebody who has not had any kind of involvement with anything in the government at all, right, in the past.
Right.
Basically it's the equivalent of like Oprah, but not even as big as Oprah. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so, and of course you have like hundreds of people that are like, oh, I would totally vote for you. I would totally, because right away it's like, oh, let's, yeah, I'll support you. You do it. Right.
Right.
And what I commented on her page was, first of all, that's really not the answer, because it's great that we're starting to wake up and want to be, the awakened or awakening community wants to be a part of that. But,
right.
But the answer is not going to come from like a person who's like a spokesperson to say, I'm going to, or a coach to say, I'm going to be a president, I'm going to run for president. My answer to that was, well, because especially if you run as a Democrat, because first of all, why would you align yourself with a broken party? Because both parties are broken.
Right.
The whole bipartisan thing is broken. So, because if you went to an independent, I'm like, I still think that had, say, Bernie Sanders run as an independent, he might have actually won the election.
Right.
I'm like, it's time for us, and maybe we take over the independent, party. Maybe we create a new party. But really what we need is a coalition, not just if somebody's stepping up and saying, okay, I'm going to run for president, because it's never going to work, because it's like, then we get into the whole martyr, or I'm going to be the savior, or I'm going to do this. And it's like, no, because it's all of us to do this. It's not for one person to stand up and do it.
Right.
It's for all of us to do it. So if we started, say, a coalition of support for those who are awakened or awakening in a unified consciousness, to start running for offices everywhere, right? Whether it's city council or, state senate or state representatives or, governor, like even at the local level, because the more we start to build, like Bernie Sanders actually has done that, where he helps to support people of similar, philosophies, and helping them get in office. Because that's how we're going to build that change, is all of us becoming involved in some way, and not just one person at a time going, I'm going to try running for office, or I'm going to try getting this bit. It's, well, because, look at the people, like you had Jesse Ventura made it to governor. I think he backed out after he made it the whole 2 years. I think he backed out before that. Because of all of the paralysis of the internal fighting.
Right. And just because you get elected doesn't mean you're effective.
Right. And so it's like, okay, well, you don't want to say, let's be, that you'd have to be comfortable working in that arena. But it would be like far easier if we built it from the bottom up and more of us actually got involved, so that, yes, eventually we could elect somebody, because we would have enough support across the board, and we would have shifted so much at the other levels that are very day to day, that people could see, oh, look at how much good this has done.
Well, and it's more about changing the whole system, not just the players in the system.
Yes, because look at how wonderful that's been going. No judgment there.
No.
But anyway, again, it goes back to this guidance of like, okay, let's get out of the ego and let's get into guidance of how do we do this, instead of like, yeah, okay, if you're getting that, yes, for you to do, that's great. But how do I do that in a way that's actually going to be successful?
Right.
Or have a better chance of being successful, or, or causing the shift in the wave of perception that's needed, because that's got to happen first before any election would happen.
Right.
Like I feel like that's what happened with Bernie Sanders. Like he created this wave of awareness that there are people out there who actually care about, the majority, the constituents, and those of us who make the country up, instead of just the the small 1%, or and I'm not even like talking about any of that, but I'm just saying it's a great example of how do we do this, and take and it's easy for us to say, yeah, you go and run, Sarah, you be the one, instead of saying, well, what am I going to do to change that? Because going and voting that way isn't enough. There aren't enough of us to make that difference yet. So the focus would be then, how do we change it so that it's, more of us? Of course, I got into a really bigger picture in a very quick way. But that does go back to the guidance thing. Instead of like looking at things the way we've done them, just every step of the way say, well, would this be the way to do it?
Right.
Is this really the goal here? Is this how we would make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
So all of it goes back down to that simple guidance and trusting in that. And it comes down to really, what's happening with a lot of people I know right now is, do I stay or do I go, right? Do I stay in this relationship? Do I stay in this job? Do I stay in this house, in this place where I live? Do I stay here or do I go? And a lot of people are getting this nudge, well, it's time to go someplace else or do something else or move on or change it from what it is today. And again, it's this attachment to the roles that we've talked about in the past, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, because that's what I was getting back around to. The thing that we had talked about was there's always those things that we say, oh, I'll change all this. But then underneath it all, there's but I won't change that.
Right.
Because the ego is like, holds that dear, my pretty, my precious, right? And so, and it's not that we have to let go of it. That's the whole point. It's not meaning that we have to let go of it, but it's that we are not attached to it as it exists right now.
Right.
Because when we're not attached to it, it will be allowed to change along with everything else. And sometimes, does that mean letting go of stuff? Yes. But more times than not, it just means it changes the situation, the relationship, the,
right.
The situation, the job, the whatever. And that comes with trusting guidance over ego, trusting the guidance of, I'm getting guided to do this, and I don't know what that's going to look like in any other way, except I'm getting guided to do this.
Right. One of the things, and for some reason this is pinging me that it fits in here, something I read, who knows where, who knows who said this, but it's like, once people realize that relationships are about evolving your consciousness, not just making you feel loved, things will be a lot better.
Right.
And that's every relationship, even if it's a relationship like with your house, or your relationship with, the electrical system in your car, or, it's your relationship with everything, that there's always a message, there's always a purpose, and that things don't just happen to you. And it can get you a lot farther down the road to connecting you with your joy and your bliss, and letting things flow, if you can look at it from that perspective.
Yes, because when we let go of how we have seen it and hold things dear, right?
And have expectation.
Have expectations. When we let go of all that and just allow it to be in its best form for where we are in our evolution right now, often it becomes so much better.
Right. And more than it would have been.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's scary. I mean, that's the fear-based ego going, yeah, but I don't know this. I don't know. Like, what if the marriage fails?
Right.
What? And I can't tell you how many people I've said that when we've had, sessions, and I'm like, so what if it does? But that doesn't mean the marriage fails. It might mean that it's done, that you're both done on this part of the journey together, because you've evolved out of it, and it's time for you to go into something else that's going to actually address both of you in a better way.
Right. Right. Why automatically think that the relationship ending on the basis that it's where it is a bad thing?
Right. Because
it could be the best thing for both.
Yes. And so what I say to people and couples who ever come into me about that is, the first thing I say is, well, number one is for you to before you make a decision, to find your own happiness again without dependence on the other person, to know what that looks like, at least even a piece of it. And then the second part is to come to the acceptance on both ends that it could be time to leave the relationship, and that it could even succeed. Because sometimes people come in and they're like, oh no, I'm done with this. I mean, on the other end, I'm done with this marriage and everything else. And it's like, well, I've worked with people on the other end who came in and they were, dead set it wasn't going to work. And then when they shifted, everything around them shifted. And then sometimes they might get separated. They might have like a period of cooling off time, and then later on it's like, whoa, wait, it came together in a much better way because they let go of what that was supposed to be.
Well, and in so many cases, if you haven't achieved the growth that relationship presented you with, that opportunity, you're only going to need to repeat it with another relationship.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes I feel like, yeah, I know. See, if anybody's just listening to this, they don't see me rolling my eyes because I can't say how many times. I know it's a judgment, but because how many times I've said that, how many times?
It's anything. It's like, you create, high maintenance pets, and you work through that. Well, then, new pets. If you haven't worked through the high maintenance creation of that pet, then you're just simply going to repeat that. It doesn't necessarily, or even friends.
Yes. Well, and you get the same kind of friend in a different person, right? The same kind.
Right.
And there are so many times when people are breaking up, and the first thing I always tell them is, I just recommend you don't get into another involved relationship for a while until you finish all of the outstanding stuff from this marriage. And I'm not saying don't ever see anybody again. What I'm saying is don't get attached right away until you're sure that you have completed this. Well, it was funny because one person, this is such a great story. One person I'm working with who is separated in the process of getting divorced. And she lives in a nice apartment with her kids now, and has like 90%, I think 80% custody or something like that. But her ex is deciding on like where he's going to go. He might go live in another state, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, she started dating this guy in the apartment complex, right? And I didn't really know much about it. I mean, I just knew it was happening. And I just kept on saying, you can date someone without being emotionally attached to them. You can just do it, and have fun. Because everybody can have a little piece of the pie, a little bit of, fun and just some variety. Anyway, so she's telling me the story on how she was dating this guy, and they were like this sort of back and forth stuff and blah, blah, blah. And she gave me a little taste of something, and I was just like, well, you don't need to be in a committed, why are you looking to be in a committed relationship right away? And I didn't really know much. And I remember once having this like little brief thought of, wow, a lot of what she's saying he does is somewhat similar to her husband. But I didn't say anything. I just sort of let that, I might have said something. I don't know, because it was in session. Anyway, so she's telling me this so funny story. She's like, blah, blah, blah. So her ex-husband has decided to move into the same apartment complex for the time being, right? And like he's like, she was helping him work through like what furniture that he could put in the apartment, and because of the floor plan. And she's like, sees the number to the apartment, and she realizes the apartment is across the hall from the guy she's dating. Right?
That's comfortable.
Right? So, and it was funny when she's telling me the story, because right away I was like, oh, look at that mirror. Right? So basically, wow, what a way for the universe to show her this is a mirror of the same person you just left, right?
Right.
So I didn't say anything because she was telling me the story, and then she goes, so I was like, well, what is that guidance about? That guidance is about, obviously, he's a little bit too much like my ex, and I think it's time for us to cool things off. She was so, I called the guy. I was like, I think we need to cool things off. I think we need to take a break. I'm not sure this is going to be the right relationship for me or whatever. And she goes, and wouldn't you know it, that this is how fast it all happened within like a week, right? All of this happened. She goes, and as soon as like the next day, she comes home and her ex is like at her apartment or texting her like something that he was there. And she's like, what's the matter? He's like, well, something happened. The other apartment's not going to be ready, so they're moving me to a different apartment. So they're giving me a different apartment. And I was like, wow, look at how that all resolved, right? Because you got the message.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, yay. She goes, I know, right? But
that's perfect.
Yeah. What a great, and that's how things are manifesting. Here's the cough again. So that's how things are manifesting right now, that fast.
Right.
Fast. And that's the reason, going back to the guidance thing, is the more we listen, right? Because when she saw that, she goes, it shocked her, like, and made her step back immediately and was like, yeah, nope.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, yay, awesome that she got that. And then immediately the universe accommodated. Okay, that's not needed now. And she couldn't have, like, if she would have panicked and tried to manage it and everything else, instead she was like, whoa, what's that trying to show me right there? Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, a lot of times we get caught up in the, oh my gosh, well, how's this going to work? And that's all ego, right? Instead of, well, why is this happening? What's the guidance about? Again, and there's no time. That's how, like I said, within a couple of days, this all happened within a week, right? So it's like, as long as we flow with it, like, it will stay flowing. It's when we say, I'm not comfortable looking at this, so I'm going to ignore it and distract myself with something else.
Right.
And oh, look, here's another thing. I'm going to do that within like hours or days. You're going to have this pile of crap. Funny that we're just
backing up.
Backing up. the toilets and the thing. Just saying. If Patty ever listens to this, there's a joke about that. Sometimes it manifests in toilet backups and issues and piping. And I mean, there's so many ways that we manifest those things. So it's looking at all the messages around us too. So just a reminder, I think today was really this reminder for us to be clear on trusting our guidance, trusting the messages, being committed to seeing them, understanding, seeing them and
staying in the alignment that makes that guidance more obvious.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that would mean trusting.
Right. Yeah, this all sounds like really good. Pulling together some loose ends and just.
Yeah. So, and again, it goes back to some sort of alignment, right? Alignment seems to be our theme this past month, right? Alignment and allowance. But it is a commitment. And it's sort of like, I think I said this in my podcast last week, which is, I know I wrote this. I don't know. Whatever. I said it somewhere. I don't even know why I try to remember. Somewhere. It's out there.
You'll find it.
That a long time ago I committed to myself that I would listen to my guidance and my messages before they would have to manifest in my physical body. And that if it did manifest in my physical body, it was something that I was truly ignoring. I had gone through like quite a number of iterations. So in general, that's really worked because anything that comes up in my physical body is really minor. And to me, it still feels like a big, huge neon sign when it does, like the cough thing, right? Because I'm like, well, what am I still choking down, right?
Right. Or not saying.
But it feels like it's clearing out better now. And because I keep on talking about all this stuff. So, but what happens is because I don't have anything else going on in my body and everything runs fine, when it's just one little thing, then all my attention can say, so what is that about? And it's usually very clear because when we don't pay attention and we ignore it because it's uncomfortable, we'll just build up more stuff in our physical body, build up more stuff. And then we have all these layers of things that are interrelated and we just don't even know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
So guidance and trusting. So let's do like our creation and intention is on holding ourselves at a vibration where
It's almost like all that comes together naturally.
Yeah.
We remember how to let that be just part of our second nature to us.
Yeah. Yep.
It's the new normal.
And it's allowed to be normal and it's allowed to be easy and natural, feel natural to us. Because then we doubt.
That's it.
Yes.
That's that sweet vibration.
Yes. Yep.
That feels great.
Yes, it does. Ease and flow.
I feel it shifting, yeah.
All right. Well, we got it. Let's go.
Yeah.
That was very nice and subtle. There's a lot of, it was tweaking a lot of stuff, but what I saw that was really cool was it was like playing one of those huge, like amazing pipe organs, right? But only playing through one or two of the like notes, like sort of like I can name that tune in two notes, right? So it's like if we only allowed our guidance to come to us in those one or two notes, like how are you going to know what the song is? How do you know the bigger picture? And as soon as you release, and it was like as soon as we release any of the stops that prevented us from hearing the other notes, it was like then you could hear the full magnificence of the whole thing. And that goes back to the symphony, the notes and being your full note and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, of course it connects into last week because that's how it always works, right? But it felt very holographic, and it was like this domino effect of all these little things and little levers, like sort of opening up all these little things. I was like, oh, this just feels nice. Like very different. That was very cool.
Yeah. It was in the beginning, I felt like almost like a computer where the memory cards are being swapped in and out, like replaced. And it was like a lot of shifting and a lot of tweaking, like you said. And it was like that smoothed out, and it was like, oh, this feels so good. It's like, yeah, second nature. And I went, wait a minute, why can't this just be first nature?
Right.
And that brought about like a whole nother set of swapping out.
Right.
And I mean, the shifting, I felt it was very physical. I feel like going back and watching the tape because I felt like I was almost quivering as things were just shifting and shuffling. And it was like, that's it. It is now my nature to stay in this alignment and this flow. And oh my gosh, it was like, talk about easy.
Easy button.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, oh, I can breathe now. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Right. And notice no coughing. Like it was just so funny. I was like, oh, wait. That was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really, really freedom.
Yes. Being free. Awesome. So on that, we'll let everyone go. What?
It took us a while to get around to that, but
yeah, today it took us a little while, but it's all important stuff.
Yeah.
An important set of tweaks for the bigger picture.
Most definitely.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Ascended World or the WTF world. As Sarah put it. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg, Avignone.
We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.